Let's start this morning with MS Now's Mark Santia outside City Hall. Christina Greer is a poli-sci professor at Fordham University. Heather Long is chief economist, I should say, at the Navy Federal Credit Union, and former Democratic Congressman from New York, Max Rose, is also with us. He's a senior advisor at Vote Vets. Happy New Year, everybody. Maybe a late night for everyone as well. Mark, Mamdani is a self-professed Democratic socialist, a Muslim, an immigrant, a millennial. All of that, of course, makes his inauguration historic. What can we expect from him today?
Well, we're expecting a lot of people to show up. We're expecting Mamdani to take the stage here, the mayor to take the stage. I want to give you a live look right now. That is City Hall. You're just looking through the park. That's City Hall where final preparations are being made. Again, the inauguration starts in just a few hours. So they're testing out sort of the sound systems and whatnot. They're expecting so many people that they have sort of put up a free block party. This is Broadway here, affectionately known as the Canyon of Heroes, and you can see all the barricades stretching down for blocks. Large monitors have been set up. This can accommodate up to 40,000 people. Not sure if 40,000 people will show up today. It is frigid out here, but there's definitely an excitement. It's building. We are seeing some spectators start to show up, but again, they're expecting to hear from the mayor just after 1 o'clock this afternoon. Ariel?
All right, Mark Santia braving the cold elements out there. I can attest it is very cold outside. Christina, at this time last year, Mamdani was a fringe candidate, basically a relative unknown. Now he's ushering in this new era here in New York City, notably with Tish James, Bernie Sanders, AOC right there by his side. Running in New York is, as we know, not the same as running a national campaign. So how much should national Democrats be extrapolating from Mamdani's momentum here?
Democrats can take from the Mamdani momentum is to have a consistent message, stick to it, and make sure you ask the voters what the message is. You know, so many of his Democratic challengers went with, a policy perspective that they thought New Yorkers wanted to hear, and that was about crime. And yes, crime was very important during the last mayoral election. But when Mamdani went block by block, borough by borough, asking voters what it is that most concerned them, consistently he heard affordability. And that was the consistent message. You know, around this time last year, he was polling at maybe 2%, 3%. And going across all 5 boroughs, even in places where folks were not necessarily going to think about him, he got new people inspired to come actually and vote in a primary. And for those of us who follow New York City politics, we know that our primary participation has been abysmal. And so he really did inspire new people and young people to actually get out to vote because of the message that most concerned them.
It was definitely a grassroots effort. Max, Mamdani made bold promises, as we know, during his campaign to address the affordability crisis in New York. The hallmarks, of course, rent freeze, universal child care, free and faster buses. But he's already facing some major hurdles, and much of this relies on getting billions of dollars approved from Albany. Do any of those lofty policies have a realistic path to success?
Yeah, I'm sure some of them do, maybe not all of them. That's just dependent on if the funds will be there. Anything's possible with the money. But look, as I think as we consider Mayor Mamdani's electoral success and the agenda that propelled him, we also have to look at that in the context of 2025. I wouldn't actually look at it as Mamdani momentum. I would look at it as Democratic momentum because, of course, Governor or soon-to-be Governor Spanberger, soon-to-be Governor Sherrill also won incredible victories by much wider margins than we saw in previous elections on that same affordability focus. So, I think the big question for 2026 is, can the Democrats continue this disciplined focus on affordability, even in consideration of their very broad ideological intent?
That's a very good question indeed. Heather, if Mamdani manages to drive through some of his more expensive promises, what does that look like for the economy?
I mean, it would be a game changer. Look, obviously, we've been in a crisis of affordability for 4 years now. Voters are incredibly upset. And I know people are already calling this the year of affordability, but it really needs to be the year of action. And whether you're Mamdani or whether you're President Trump, as Christina was saying, the voters really want to see tangible action. I think the biggest one that I'm watching is what can he do on childcare and housing. Both of those areas have grown way faster than people's incomes and wages in the past 5 years. There's a real need for the United States to address these supply problems. There simply aren't enough spots, let alone enough affordable spots. And so anything that Mamdani can do to move the dial towards free or reduced childcare or housing costs is immediately going to become a national model for Democrats.
Yeah, he's very much aligned with Kathy Hochul on the issue of childcare, so perhaps that's a bit of a runway for him on housing, and specifically rent freeze seems like a bit more of an uphill climb. But Heather, a lot has been said about a potential business exodus from NYC during a Mamdani administration. Do you see the signs that that's actually going to happen?
Well, we'll see. I mean, you see the same things happen across many states and in other countries. You know, when France has talked about various policies, a lot of upper income families and companies always say that they're going to flee. But the reality is it rarely happens. Maybe you get one or two high profile relocations, but I don't think many businesses are going to leave the heart of finance, the heart of culture, a place where there's so much talent located in New York City. But, you know, look, I think a lot could happen on the business side. We also have what's going to happen with the tariffs. There's going to be a Supreme Court ruling soon. So there's a number of factors that companies are going to be taking into consideration here right in January, February.
So you don't see a mass exodus to somewhere like Florida or Texas anytime soon, I assume. Christina, how critical will this first 100 days be in determining what Mamdani can actually accomplish?
Coming in with high approval ratings and an era of good feelings. I mean, there are a lot of people who want him to succeed. I think that, you know, he's got to start with some small wins. I mean, he does have a majority Democratic city council, even though the soon-to-be city council speaker could present some potential obstacles for him. But I think, you know, the good thing is, as Heather sort of alluded to, is that, you know, Kathy Hochul's up for re-election. Her primary is in June. And yes, she is running against her own lieutenant governor. So there are ways that Kathy Hochul will need Mamdani as well. She'll need downstate New Yorkers to show up for her specifically. So there are opportunities for them to work together. And I think a lot of New Yorkers, because of the laissez-faire, I'm being very polite here, the laissez-faire aspect of Mayor Eric Adams and even Bill de Blasio, who was mayor for 8 years, but for the last 6 was everywhere but New York City. I think a lot of New Yorkers are excited to have someone who at least looks like they are working. And so he's got a teeny bit of a runway, I think, where he can work with Albany, he can work with Kathy Hochul to at least start to show New Yorkers that progress is being made.
Yeah, certainly a symbiotic need to collaborate with Kathy Hochul. I know she needs him, he needs her. Max, clearly Mamdani's policies are diametrically opposed to President Trump's, especially on foreign policy, on immigration. But we did see a kind of cozy-looking interaction in the Oval Office, which surprised a lot of people. How much hinges on Mamdani's relationship with the president? His allies like AOC and Sanders obviously thrive on their adversarial relationship with Trump.
Sure. Well, yeah, that was probably the most wild political moment of 2025, seeing Donald Trump lavish praise on Mamdani, to include saying that he looks gorgeous in person, something, you know, I can attest to. The guy's good looking in person. But, you know, the undeniably, right, New York City relies on federal support. And if there's an antagonistic relationship between the White House and City Hall, that's not good for New Yorkers. What's interesting, though, about this dynamic is that the relationship between New York City is not analogous to the relationship between, let's say, Portland to the White House. And no disrespect to Portland, but that's a blip on the screen when it comes to America's GDP. New York City represents a significant portion of the United States GDP, as well as its future economic prospects. And so if Donald Trump wants to accomplish his economic agenda of increased economic growth, he needs Mayor Mamdani to be successful. He needs a safe New York City. He needs a prosperous New York City. So you're going to see this weird symbiotic relationship potentially emerge, at least for now. Of course, Donald Trump is a shark. And if he sees a political opportunity to be antagonistic to Mayor Mamdani and New York City, he will, of course, take it. So there's much more to come in this story.
Yeah, of course, President Trump is going to be looking for that window and will seize any moment of weakness. Heather, what do you see happening as far as federal funds like we were talking about? If Mamdani does butt heads with the president, how could that impact the city? And how could it impact, the broader economy?
I mean, look, it would be a huge detriment to lose any federal funding. And already we're seeing threats from the White House to pull back on child care subsidies, the few child care subsidies that are currently in place across the nation, not just in New York City, in response to reporting about misuse funds and potentially in Minnesota. And so these threats are going to continue. Whether or not they turn into action, we'll see. Obviously, all eyes are also on what's happening with the debate over the healthcare funding and subsidies for people purchasing Obamacare. And so all of this goes right to the feelings that Americans, particularly middle class and moderate income Americans, are feeling. The big picture reality is wage growth is slowing down. Even people who have jobs are feeling that prices are up and their wages are not keeping pace, in many cases at the lower end of the spectrum. And now unemployment is rising. We have over 1 million more Americans unemployed now than a year ago. And that's really the biggest challenge, I think, for 2026. We don't want to see layoffs pick up.